Nobody is holding you back. That's the lie you repeat because the truth is harder to swallow. You're not trapped. You're not unlucky. You're not behind because a system is rigged. You're behind because everything gets a vote over your life. Your mood gets a vote. Your fear gets a vote. Other people's opinions get a vote. Your past mistakes get a vote. Your comfort gets a vote. And somehow, you'll keep losing the election. I didn't lose because I wasn't capable. I lost because I kept explaining myself to people who were never going to live my consequences. Let me say this clearly. The moment you explain your decisions, you hand your power to someone who didn't earn it. Explanation is not maturity. It's permission seeking in a better outfit. And most people spend their entire lives negotiating with things that don't care if they win or lose. Here's what no one tells you. The world doesn't stop strong people. It waits for negotiable people. Negotiable people say things like, I'll start when I feel ready. I just need more clarity. Let me explain why now isn't the right time. Once things calm down, I'll move. That sounds reasonable. It sounds intelligent. But it's deadly. Because while you're explaining, life keeps moving without you. You think you're being careful. You're not. You're afraid of standing alone with a decision. So you soften it. You justify it. You explain it. Not because it's unclear, but because you're scared of what happens if no one agrees with you. And here's the brutal truth. If your decision needs approval, it was never really yours. There was a point where I realized something uncomfortable. People weren't stopping me. They were waiting for me to hesitate, waiting for me to doubt, waiting for me to ask, is this okay? And every time I did, they voted against me, not because they hated me, but because they had nothing to lose. The fastest way to lose control of your life is to let people who don't pay the price have a say in your decisions. Read that again. Most people don't lack discipline. They lack finality. They keep their goals open for discussion, their boundaries open for debate, their standards open for negotiation. And the world takes full advantage of that, because life doesn't respect intentions. It respects non-negotiable behavior. I didn't become stronger when I learned more. I became stronger the moment I stopped explaining myself. Because when explanation ends, authority begins. And once nothing gets a vote over your life, everything changes. Here's something uncomfortable most people never realize. The more you explain yourself, the less serious people take you. Not because your reasons are weak, but because power never asks to be understood. The moment you explain your move, you open the door for opinions. And opinions are cheap. People don't listen to your explanation to understand you. They listen to find a place to disagree, because disagreement gives them relevance. And when you explain yourself, you give them exactly what they want. A seat at a table they didn't earn. Hard truths. In the real world, authority is felt, not explained. CEOs don't explain every decision. Leaders don't justify every move. High-value individuals don't run their lives like group projects. They decide. They move. And everyone else adjusts. The explanation comes after results, not before action. Why people crave clarity. You tell yourself, I just need clarity before I move. That sounds responsible. It's not. Clarity is often fear pretending to be intelligence. Because clarity means safety. Clarity means you can't be blamed. Clarity means you can say, I thought this through. But life doesn't reward perfect thinking. It rewards decisive pressure. The clarity trap. Most people don't want clarity. They want permission to avoid regret. So they wait. They analyze. They research. They prepare. And quietly, someone less prepared but more decisive passes them. Not because they were better, because they were unavailable for hesitation. The world doesn't replace people who make mistakes. It replaces people who hesitate. Here's the part nobody wants to admit. You're not negotiating with others. You're negotiating with yourself. Every morning, I'll go hard tomorrow. I'll lock in next week. Once things settle, I'll focus. That's not patience. That's self-betrayal done slowly enough to feel normal. Why strong people move without signals. Strong people don't wait for confidence. They move without it. They don't wait for certainty. They create it through action. Because confidence is a byproduct of movement, not a prerequisite. Waiting to feel ready is how average lives are built. At some point, you have to realize no signal is coming. No green light is appearing. No moment will feel perfect. And the longer you wait for one, the more negotiable you become. I stopped asking, does this make sense? And start asking, does this move me forward? That question alone eliminates 90% of hesitation. Most people lose their future, not in one bad decision, but in thousands of small negotiations they never needed to have. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. At some point, you stop asking how to win, and you start asking who you need to become. So losing isn't even an option. That's where non-negotiable people are born. The truth about boundaries. Most people think boundaries are rules. They're not. Boundaries are signals. They tell the world how much access it has to you. And right now, the world has too much access to you. Your time, your attention, your energy, your emotions, all open, all negotiable. Why people don't respect you. Let's get honest. People don't cross your boundaries because they're evil. They cross them because you train them to. Every time you explain instead of act, delay instead of decide, soften instead of stand. You teach people how to treat you, and the lesson sticks. Respect is not demanded. It's enforced through consistency. The shift happens when people realize something about you. You don't argue. You don't convince. You don't debate. You move. And when you move, the conversation ends. That's when resistance disappears. Not because they agree with you, but because they can't stop you. They don't announce decisions. They don't seek validation. They don't explain timelines. They act and let reality do the talking. Silence is not weakness. Silence is control. External boundaries don't matter if your internal boundaries are weak. If your mood can change your actions, you're negotiable. If your past can slow you down, you're negotiable. If discomfort can stop you, you're negotiable. Non-negotiable people decide once and execute daily. Discipline redefined. Discipline isn't motivation. Discipline is removing the option to negotiate. You don't ask yourself, do I feel like it? You tell yourself, this is happening. And feelings adjust later. The price of being non-negotiable. Let's be clear. This costs you comfort. This costs you approval. This costs you relationships that only existed because you were easy to influence. And that's the price. Because freedom is expensive. And most people can't afford it. The strongest people aren't aggressive. They're unavailable. Unavailable for excuses. Unavailable for debate. Unavailable for delay. The moment you become non-negotiable, some people will call you cold. Some will call you selfish. Some will say you've changed. They're right. You did. That's why your life will start moving. Why most people quit here. Nobody warns you about this part. They tell you success is hard. They tell you discipline is painful. They tell you growth is uncomfortable. What they don't tell you is how quiet it gets when you stop negotiating. Authority is a lonely place. The moment you become non-negotiable, something changes around you. The messages slow down. The invites disappear. The conversations feel shorter. Not because you did something wrong, but because people feel something around you now. Finality. And finality makes most people uncomfortable. Why people fall off at this stage? This is where most people break. Not because it's too hard, but because it feels empty. No applause, no reassurance. No one saying, "You're doing the right thing," just silence. And if you're addicted to feedback, this silence feels like failure. The strongest decisions you'll ever make will feel invisible at first. If you need validation to continue, you were never built to lead yourself. The social cost of self-authority. When you stop explaining yourself, people lose access to you. And when people lose access, they lose influence. So they test you. They question you. They doubt you. They subtly push boundaries again, not to understand you, but to see if the old version is still there. Test moment. This is the moment that defines everything. Do you explain, or do you stand still? Because the second you explain again, you tell them. This boundary is temporary, and they'll remember that forever. Standing alone without hardening. Here's the mistake most people make. They think being non-negotiable means being loud, aggressive, or cruel. It doesn't. Real authority doesn't argue. It doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't convince. It simply doesn't move. The strongest position in any situation is calm refusal. Why silence is misunderstood. Silence makes insecure people nervous because silence doesn't explain itself. And when you don't explain, others are forced to sit with their assumptions. That's not cruelty. That's discipline. This stage isn't about other people. It's about you. About resisting the urge to soften just to feel connected again. About not reopening doors you worked hard to close. About choosing long-term control over short-term comfort. Loneliness isn't a sign you're lost. It's a sign you're no longer available. To be controlled, if you can survive this silence without negotiating your standards, you enter a phase most people never reach. Where momentum replaces motivation. Where respect replaces explanation. Where your life starts responding to you. There's a moment most people never reach. Not because it's hidden, but because it requires something rare. Consistency without emotion. No motivation. No inspiration. No excitement. Just movement. And once you reach that point, life starts responding differently. Why motivation fails? Motivation is emotional, and emotions negotiate. They show up late. They leave early. They make excuses sound logical. That's why most people keep starting over. Because motivation expires. Momentum doesn't. Motivation asks, do I feel like it? So momentum asks, what's next? How momentum is built. Momentum is not built by doing more. It's built by doing without discussion. No inner debate. No emotional check-in. No mental rehearsal. You remove the option to hesitate. And once hesitation is gone, speed becomes natural. Here's the part people don't expect. When you stop negotiating with yourself, life stops negotiating with you. Opportunities appear faster. People respond differently. Resistance drops. Not because you're lucky, but because you're predictable. And predictability creates trust. You don't tell people you're disciplined. They notice. You don't tell people you've changed. They feel it. You don't explain your pace. They either keep up or disappear. Why consistency is dangerous. Consistency without emotion makes you dangerous. Because you're no longer reactive. Praise doesn't slow you down. Criticism doesn't move you. Failure doesn't stop you. You adjust and continue. That's it. I don't rely on how I feel. I rely on what I decided. That single rule eliminates chaos. This is where the distance grows. Between you and who you used to be. Between you and people who still negotiate. They wonder how you're moving so fast. You're not faster. You're just not stopping. Once momentum locks in, you don't need reminders. You don't need speeches. You don't need external pressure. Your life becomes self-correcting. And at that point, losing feels unnatural. The point of no return. There's a moment where improvement stops being reversible, where you can't go back, even if you wanted to. Most people never reach it, not because they can't, but because it scares them. Why most people keep a back door? People say they want change. What they really want is progress with an exit plan. They want discipline, but only if it still feels familiar. They want growth, but only if they can return to comfort. So they keep a version of themselves alive, just in case. That's why nothing sticks. If you keep the old version alive, it will sabotage the new one. Every time. The shift happens when you stop asking, what if this doesn't work? And start asking, what if I never go back? No safety net. No emotional backup plan. No identity to retreat into. Just forward. This fear is different. It's not loud. It's quiet. Controlled. Heavy. It sounds like this is real now. There's no excuse left. If I fail, it's on me. And that's why most people stop here. Because full responsibility is terrifying. Freedom begins, where excuses stop existing. At this point, old habits are gone. New rewards aren't visible yet. Motivation is irrelevant. Validation is absent. You're standing between identities. And most people panic here. They mistake the silence for failure. It's not. It's separation. You can't become dangerous while staying familiar. You can't build authority while keeping your old comfort alive. Something has to die. Not physically. Psychologically. I didn't improve my life. I replaced the person who kept negotiating with it. Once you accept, no one is coming. No excuse is left. No permission is needed. You stop hoping things will change and start enforcing change. That's the point of no return. After this stage, life doesn't feel dramatic. It feels controlled. And control is addictive. When life starts bending, after a certain point, you stop chasing control. Because control comes to you. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. The shift most people don't notice. You don't wake up one day feeling powerful. You wake up one day realizing things move when you move. People adjust when you decide. Delays disappear when you stop allowing them. Not because you demanded it. Because you became consistent enough to be trusted by reality. Core truth. Life doesn't reward intensity. It rewards inevitability. When your actions are predictable, outcomes stop resisting you. Why life starts bending? Here's the uncomfortable reality. Life resists chaos. Life resists indecision. Life resists people who keep changing their mind. But it cooperates with structure. Once your behavior becomes stable, the friction drops. You don't fight for momentum anymore. Momentum follows you. This is where weak people misunderstand strength. They think power is loud. They think dominance is aggressive. They think control needs pressure. It doesn't. True authority is calm. You don't rush. You don't explain. You don't prove. You decide and move at your pace. Others adapt or fall away. The strongest people don't convince. They proceed. Why people start watching you. At this stage, something subtle happens. People don't question you anymore. They observe you. Because observation is safer than confrontation. When someone doesn't negotiate, your consistency removes their leverage. You're not excited. You're not emotional. You're not chasing anything. You're locked in, calm, focused, unavailable. And that's why you're dangerous. Drama exists where boundaries are weak. Once boundaries are final, drama starves. There's nothing to react to, nothing to argue about, nothing to explain. Only execution. This is where you finally understand. Nothing was holding you back. Not people, not fear, not circumstances. Only negotiation. And once negotiation ended, everything accelerated. Most people will hear this and feel uncomfortable. Good. Because comfort is the enemy of authority. And if this hits you, it's because you know exactly where you've been compromising. Stop explaining yourself. Stop reopening decision. Stop giving votes to things that don't pay the cost of your life. Decide once, move daily, and let reality adjust. Nothing gets a vote over your life. And once that's true, you don't need motivation anymore. No excuses left. At this stage, something happens that most people can't handle. You realize there's no one left to blame. Not your past, not your parents, not the system, not timing, not luck, just you. And that realization is heavier than failure. Why people run from ownership. People don't avoid discipline. They avoid full responsibility. Because once responsibility is complete, excuses stop working. And excuses are emotional painkillers. They don't fix anything. They just make delay feel justified. The moment excuses disappear, progress becomes unavoidable. The last excuse most people keep. Here's the final excuse people protect at all costs. I'm still figuring things out. That sentence sounds harmless. It's not. It's how people give themselves permission to stay unfinished forever. Because figuring things out has no deadline. Non-negotiable people don't wait to feel ready. They move with incomplete information and adjust without drama. Because progress doesn't come from certainty. It comes from ownership under pressure. At this stage, you stop saying, I hope things work out, and start saying, I'll make it work. Hope disappears. Control replaces it. Hope is for people who haven't decided yet. Why this feels heavy? Ownership feels heavy because it is. You carry the outcome, the consequences, the blame, the credit, all of it. And most people would rather stay average than carry that weight. Pressure crushes people who negotiate. Power strengthens people who decide. Once excuses are gone, pressure stops feeling hostile. It feels neutral, like gravity. This is where something irreversible starts forming. You stop lying to yourself. No more. Tomorrow. Soon. Eventually. One day. Just execution. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to the level of excuses you allow. The ruthless self-contract. Rules you never break. At this point, motivation is dead. Good. Because motivation was never reliable. What replaces it now is something stronger. A contract. not written on paper, written in behavior. Why most people fail long term. People fail because they keep promises to everyone except themselves. They negotiate deadlines. They forgive laziness. They explain inconsistency. And every time they do, their word loses value. Not to others, to themselves. Once your word means nothing to you, nothing you build will last. What a self-contract really is. A self-contract is simple. You decide what happens no matter what never gets debated, what doesn't depend on mood, no inspiration, no flexibility, no exceptions, just execution. Rule 1, decisions don't get reopened. Once you decide, it's done. You don't revisit it at night. You don't second-guess it in the morning. You don't ask how you feel about it. Reopening decisions is how weak identities survive. Strong identities move forward, even uncomfortable. Rule 2, emotions don't lead action. You act first. Emotion catches up later. If emotion leads, action dies. If action leads, emotion adapts. That order never changes. Rule 3, no explanations during execution. You don't justify, you don't defend, you don't explain your pace. Execution is not a discussion. Results speak when you're done. Rule 4, consistency over intensity. You don't go hard, you go daily. Intensity burns out. Consistency dominates. You don't need perfect days, you need non-negotiable days. I don't trust how I feel. I trust what I do, repeatedly. Why this contract is ruthless? Because it removes comfort. No bad day discounts. No emotional refunds. No sympathy from yourself. And that's why it works. Because life doesn't give sympathy either. One day something changes. You don't feel proud. You don't feel excited. You feel stable. And stability is rare. That's when you realize you don't need discipline anymore. You become predictable to yourself. When your actions stop surprising you, your future stops being uncertain. At this stage, you don't talk about goals. You don't announce changes. You don't seek accountability. You are the system. And systems don't need motivation. Nothing gets a vote over your life. After this point, there is no misunderstanding. You either live like someone in control, or you live like someone available. There is no middle ground. Most people think they need more time. They don't. They need fewer negotiations. Every delay you call thinking is a decision to stay the same. And staying the same is a choice, even if you don't admit it. Life does not punish people who fail. It punishes people who hesitate forever. Failure teaches. Hesitation erases. What this was really about. This was never about discipline, never about motivation, never about confidence. It was about authority. Who decides when you move? Who decides when you stop? Who decides what matters? If the answer is anything other than you already lost. There are only two kinds of people. Those who decide once and let life adjust. And those who keep asking permission until time decides for them. Time is not kind to negotiators. No more speeches. At this stage, speeches are useless. You don't need reminders. You don't need affirmations. You don't need another video. You need a line you don't cross. From now on, you don't explain decisions. You don't reopen choices. You don't negotiate with moods. You don't delay to feel ready. You decide. You move. You repeat. That's it. I don't need permission to live the life I'm responsible for. Why most people won't do this? Because it's lonely. Because it's quiet. Because there's no applause. When you stop negotiating, only results. And most people would rather feel supported than be free. If this made you uncomfortable, good. That discomfort is the part of you that knows exactly where you've been compromising. And it also knows this is the last excuse. Draw the line. Not tomorrow. Not after clarity. Not when it feels right. Now, stop explaining yourself. Stop asking for votes. Stop negotiating your standards. Decide once. Move daily. Let reality adjust. Nothing gets a vote over your life. And once that's true, there's nothing left to say.